So hey YouTube, in this video I'm going to review the PlayStation game Final Fantasy VII, the famous Final Fantasy VII. Now, I did not play this game growing up. In fact, I didn't play any PlayStation games or PlayStation 2 games or any Final Fantasy games at all until I was like 23, and this was the first one. This is the first Final Fantasy game or JRPG from those PlayStation systems that I ever played. And I have to say, it not only revitalized my interest in video games, but it started my JRPG craze that I've been in ever since playing FF7. And pretty much since then, I've just been on a tear. I've played Final Fantasies 4 through 10-2, and a bunch of other ones, a bunch of other JRPGs other than those in the meantime, and pretty much JRPGs are all I want to play now. And I've played through Final Fantasy VII like 3, maybe 4 times. I played through it most recently in this last spring semester. So yeah, it's warranted those playthroughs because I've found it to be an excellent game, and every time I play through it I find something new, at least one thing new, often a few things new that I never noticed before, and I appreciated it even a little more. So anyway, because I didn't experience this game as a kid, I'm giving this review as kind of a nostalgia-free perspective. So, I know how hyped Final Fantasy VII is. A lot of people say it's one of the best games of all time, but at the same time, there's critics who say, oh, it's just people who grew up with it as a kid, and it's not actually as good as it is. But I'm offering an adult's perspective, an adult who only played through this like 4 years ago. So hopefully I can penetrate through the fog of nostalgia. So the first thing I want to talk about with Final Fantasy VII is the visuals, because the visuals were one of the first things that I noticed when I first popped this game into the used PlayStation that I got off eBay. And I have to say, the first thing you notice, being someone who's seen like PS2 and PS3 graphics, is that the character models, at least like on the overworld and in towns, they look pretty blocky. And at first, for like the first 5 minutes I played this game, it kind of turned me off, and it was like, oh, they look so weird and misshapen. But I quickly got over that, because what happened was the story of this game swept me off my feet and really drew me in the more I played, and just the overall quality of this game really drew me in the more I played it. And any graphical limitations of the PS1 era were quickly forgotten for me. And to make a few other notes on visuals, those blocky character sprites, they actually aren't seen in all instances of the game, because, for instance, if you go into a battle, better character sprites will appear, and they look quite a bit more realistic and more well done, and just nicer to look at. And you also see those nicer character models in the cutscenes of this game, and I've got to say, the cutscenes are beautiful. The cutscenes, I don't care if this is a PS1 game, the animations of the cutscenes and the textures, it just really still blows me away, even though it's 2017 now and I've seen PS3 graphics and whatnot. It's still really good to me, and I still think it looks fantastic. And other things that are typical for these PS1 games, like the pre-rendered backgrounds, I thought those were also excellent, just really great. And yeah, the environments as a whole were just pretty superb. Honestly, they had a lot of atmosphere and a good amount of like grit to them. Whether it was a natural environment or something more city-like, it was always very detailed, and just everything was enjoyable to look at for me. So I've got no complaints with the visuals. I thought the visuals were truly great for Final Fantasy VII. And the next thing I want to get into is story. And the story, that is like one of the prime things that makes this game for me. The story is so good, and it just it draws you in right from the beginning. Right from the beginning, you're thrown into the action of the story, and there's a sense of urgency, and from that moment on, it just never lags, really. And there's always something going on in the story, always some mystery to be unraveled, or something you want to find out, or an objective that you need to do to get more information on the more mysterious parts of the plot. And it's just really great. And it's got a lot of really wonderful themes, I think. For instance, like, something I notice is there's a lot of human civilization versus nature in this game. And you could also say maybe like science versus nature. And that's something I really enjoy in any work of fiction. And there's also like questions of ethics, things like consequentialism versus deontology, whether it's the means that should justify ends or ends that justify means. And these kinds of questions are brought up a bit throughout the story. They kind of make your cast of characters, wonder about the morality of their actions, and that adds some complexity and depth to the story and motives. And it also grays the line a little bit between good and evil, which is another thing I'm a huge fan of, because I'm a strong believer that there really is no good and evil. I like the idea that it's all kind of just relative. And there's also more personal themes involved here. Things like identity get touched on, psychology, guilt, self-doubt. There's a few different characters in your party that kind of struggle with these issues, and one of them is definitely the protagonist you play as, Cloud Strafe. And Cloud is one of those protagonists that is both famous but sometimes infamous, depending on who you ask, because some people think he's just kind of angsty and whiny and too quiet and aloof, but I think the way he acts is pretty justified throughout the game, and he does grow a bit. And also, I kind of have a weird taste in characters, and I kind of like asshole characters like that, I have to admit. I kind of like characters who are rude and quiet and aloof, because honestly, that's sort of the way I am in real life. So yeah, I like characters like that, because whenever there's a character who's all real personable and outgoing and happy and friendly. It just seems a little fake to me. But that's just me, and maybe just a matter of preference. And to talk about the other characters, the cast of characters is so strong in Final Fantasy VII. I mean, Cloud is already a good character in my book, a good main character, but you've got a couple different female characters who can kind of both or either be considered sort of a, you know, a potential romantic interest, but neither of them, neither of the relationships with them are like really too forced or anything, which is good. Um, I don't like to see like romantic relationships that are too forced in any kind of RPG, but that kind of relationship potential is there and a little bit built into the story, which is okay with me. That's cool. Um, you've got, though, a really big cast of other characters in this game who each have their own very deep backgrounds, and the game, as you go through the story, you find out a lot about their backgrounds and what makes these characters who they are, what makes them think the way they do, act the way they do, what they value, what they struggle for in life, and it's honestly pretty powerful. There's a lot of power in their motives, I think, and you know, as they're on this journey, it's kind of highlighted why they're fighting and why this struggle in this epic game means so much. And I thought that even more so than the character development. And there was some good character development in this game, but finding out those backgrounds was really pretty rewarding and satisfying for me to learn for all these characters. And I also have to make a note here on the villains. The cast of villains in this game is just so rich. It is so good. And yeah, because you've got the main villainous corporation, you know, Shinra. I'm representing Shinra here. I got my Shinra shirt just for this review. You got Shinra, but they're, you know, there's different people in Shinra. There's a lot of different, like, branches of Shinra that you see throughout the game who are sort of standing at your way in different points of the story. And then there's also Sephiroth, you know, Sephiroth, the famous villain who has become so iconic and has such great style and great hair, I might add. And yeah, he is a great villain, definitely. Um, he's got a unique, he's got a unique set of goals, I would say, and a unique relationship with a certain science fiction origin. You know, I'm not going to spoil it. Just take my word for it. It's good. It's good stuff. What else here? What else? Oh, I have to make a note for Hojo. Professor Hojo is a scientist working for Shinra, and he's probably my favorite Final Fantasy character of all the Final Fantasy games I've played. Hojo is my favorite. I don't think anybody else really comes close for me, because he is just so insane, you know, and so obsessed with his experiments, and yeah, insane, irredeemable Hojo. He is just something else, that guy. And honestly, a lot of what he does is pretty responsible for setting up a lot of things in this plot, and he's kind of, in a way, yeah, one of the most instrumental villains in the whole game, I thought. And I also have to say, I might be a little biased because I am a biochemistry student personally, and I work in a couple different labs, so I'm a little like a mad scientist myself. So that may be why I have a little soft spot for Hojo. But yeah, I think that'll do it for characters. Next thing I want to go into is the gameplay, and starting off with the battle system. The battle system in Final Fantasy VII is really deep, really customizable, and just overall very user friendly. It's the materia system, some of you may have heard about, and it offers a lot of individuality in how you want to equip your characters and what abilities you want to give them. Like you can basically give any characters you want any kind of abilities you want that are so common in the Final Fantasy games. The typical magic spells, your fire, ice, lightning stuff, your cure, and other specialized spells. And it's just really nice to have the freedom to do that because, so often in these RPGs you have like characters who are stereotyped into certain class roles in battle, like your female lead character will be your healer, and I don't like that. I like having the freedom to dictate what my characters do, and if I want to have my female characters be more like brutish physical attackers or whatever, I like to be able to do that. So it's cool to have a little of that freedom in Final Fantasy VII. And let's see, yeah, it's pure turn-based battle in Final Fantasy VII, and I really like pure just turn-based battle. It's one of my favorite kinds of battle systems in these games, and you've got at least two, maybe three options for how fast-paced kind of you want the battles to go. Like there's an option where you can have the timer in battle sort of pause while you're just picking out your magics to use, your magic spells to use, and alternatively you can just have time keep going and going as you're picking out your magic and never having it stop so that the battle's more fast paced. Personally, I like to do the wait option where I can just pick out my magic meticulously and be very careful, but that's just the kind of person I am. Yeah, other things, there's a gigantic world map in this game, huge world to explore, and you're given great opportunities to do so as the plot advances. You have an array of different vehicles you eventually get access to, so that's really cool to be able to explore the entire world because it's so big and rich. Um, Something else I want to make a note on is the dungeons. Dungeons in Final Fantasy VII. I say dungeons because they're so seamlessly interwoven, I thought, into the plot. Like, as I go place to place in this game, I never feel like there's a clear, or I rarely feel like there's a clear dungeon that is just like thrust upon me and, now I'm starting a dungeon. Okay, now the dungeon is over. Now I'm on the world map. It's not like that. It's like it flows from the story points like into these areas that are dungeon like and that have more battles, and then it just flows out and kind of there's a very smooth continuity between dungeon like areas and other parts of the game that are more story oriented and dialogue heavy, and I really appreciate that because It just gives everything a more organic feel, and it's just a easier way to experience a narrative. It feels more natural. Um, Also, something a lot of JRPGs have are, you know, various little mini games, things to kind of mix up gameplay and give you fresh, a fresh kind of break from the typical grind. Sometimes, literally, if you're level grinding, of just going to town, battle to battle, and this game shines in that department in terms of mini games. Like there's all these little missions that have unique mechanics to them scattered throughout the story, and not too many of them I would say were frustrating. There was maybe one or two that felt a little unnecessary and kind of annoying, but on the whole, the vast majority of them were great, I thought, and they were just cool little breaks from the typical RPG experience. At one moment early on in the game, you're like on this motorcycle going down this highway, and you have to defend your comrades from these enemy motorcycles, and it feels a little like a racing game. And you know, the mechanics aren't maybe the best for what they are, but it's still very workable. It works, and it was overall just a really nice break from the typical RPG kind of stuff that you do. Um, let's see. The other thing I want to get into now is music. The music of this game, which is, I have to say, fantastic. The music Final Fantasy VII is probably it's definitely I'd say like one of my top three favorite game soundtracks, and there's some good game soundtracks out there, so that's saying something. Um, Nobuo Uematsu is the composer who's done a lot of Final Fantasy soundtracks, and I've got nothing but high praise for pretty much everything about the soundtrack. Even it being a PS1 soundtrack and being sort of limited in that regard, I don't think any limitations showed or detracted. Uh, the arrangements were great. Uh, just the variety of songs was great. It's a big soundtrack. You hear a lot of tracks throughout this game, and even things like the battle theme, I didn't get too tired of, even though I grinded quite a bit throughout my playthroughs. And yeah, it elicits so many different feelings, I have to say. Like, as I played this game, I just got feelings of like comfort, peace, unease at times, dread, and there was also just a lot of tracks that had this sense of mystery and wonder to them, but at the same time, sometimes it had like this quiet anxiety. It's hard to describe, but part of it was not just the compositions, but the instrumentation, which I thought was really good. And there's a lot of synth type stuff in here. There's like synth strings, but the synth strings, it's not. Normally you think synth strings, and that doesn't sound like something that would sound good, but it does in this game. Like, it's really good to me. Like, the quality of the sounds, it's not like inherently high quality, but it's just there's something really comforting and warming about the quality of the sounds in this game's music. And also a lot of shimmering, rich, kind of soft bell-like tones in various songs. At times you get real ominous percussion and moody bass lines. I love moody bass lines. And yeah, it just sounded so good. Just warm, natural sounding synths, analog sounding, I guess you could say. And mostly classical music, kind of. Mostly classical is the genre of the tracks, but also a bit jazzy at times. Got a little bit jazzy at a few moments, and that's always pretty neat, I think, to get a little bit of jazz mixed into a game soundtrack. And let's see what to talk about now. I think that just about does it. I think I've pretty much covered everything I want to say about Final Fantasy VII. Overall, just such a magnificent game, really. Just such a magnificent game. Um, it's a pretty dark game, a lot of dark themes, and I like dark stuff, so that's good in my book. And there's something really unique about the whole setting of Final Fantasy VII as well, because on the one hand, you know, it's got the classical sort of swords and sorcery that a lot of RPGs have, because it's got your magic spells, it's got a few characters that use your sort of medieval like weapons. I mean, just look at this cover, you got Cloud there with his gigantic frickin' sword. Um, but at the same time, it mixes this kind of more futuristic, like sci-fi, urban, industrial setting with the swords and sorcery. And there's something just so cool about that in this game. That mixed with its, dark sci-fi plot elements, it just really clicks with me deeply. Like I really can't think of another game story that has resonated with me so much. And yeah, another bit of dichotomy, is like you got the organic, majestic landscapes, talking about the environments, and that's broken up by the occasional place that has like this harsh industrial scenery, like whether you're at the Shinra building or some kind of like factory like setting in Midgar. It's just it's really unique having those two kinds of things mixed together, and it gives such variation to the world you explore. And yeah, I just love it. At the same time, there's these industrial places. There's like mountains, like snowy mountains you're going to, and tropical places and deserts, and that's something I'm a sucker for. I'm a sucker for being able to explore a lot of varied and exotic and different environments and games. I really like that. It adds to the escapism, and just it adds a lot to these games, I think. But yeah, I think that about wraps up what I can say about this game. If you haven't played Final Fantasy VII, I really recommend you play it if you're at all into RPGs. Before you play anything else, play Final Fantasy VII, because to me, it is just a work of art. It's just a magnificent work of art, and I feel like it almost injected nostalgia into me as I played this game. Like, I didn't grow up with it, but immediately after I played through it once, there's just so much about it that feels so right. it's just like it imbued me with nostalgia right away. And now I just have like nothing but good feelings that are elicited every time I think about playing Final Fantasy VII. So with that, I will say peace out, YouTube, and keep on gaming.